Welcome to Fangame Exploration, I'm Ryan, and today I've been playing Sonic the Hedgehog before the sequel, and as always, the link to this game can be found in the description below. So I believe the first thing I should say is that this does indeed feel like a classic Sonic game. The developer hit the nail on the head with the control and feel of Sonic and Tails, but I should say that the original Sonic games had a slippery feeling to them due to Sonic's speed, which I personally didn't like, but this game does actually include this, which while I don't like it, is accurate to the classic games. As for the speed of the game, it's not as fast and focuses more on the platforming rather than trying to reach high speeds. But I don't see this as a problem. Some people enjoy Sonic for its fast-paced action, whilst others play the game for the platforming. I personally prefer a mixture of the two. One thing that I think didn't feel like classic Sonic were the enemies that were put into the game. While many of them are recolored or altered versions of enemies from older games, the placement of them feels cheap, like they're always trying to catch you off guard by popping up from the ground or appearing in a place where they're difficult to avoid. Now, as the name implies, before the sequel is set between Sonic 1 and 2, and is made up of several zones, all with a set theme. Each zone consists of 3 action stages with an optional special stage on the third, followed by a boss fight. Most of these levels are nicely done with an interesting theme behind them, and are all well put together. The special stages consist of collecting rings to gain a possible life, and from what I can tell, the Chaos Emeralds are not present in this game, despite being in the opening cutscene. My only assumption is that Sonic still has them from the first game. Now the boss fights, I'm sad to say, are one of the weaker points of the game. Out of the 7 I fought, 6 of them used some form of projectile which the player needed to avoid. In most cases this was some sort of laser beam. I thought this was a bit lazy and didn't really make for an interesting boss fight. Generally the bosses weren't fun. I personally believe they do not live up to the same quality as the boss fights out of the classic Sonic games and could have had more thought and effort put into them. Additionally, many of the boss fights are on a moving plane, so when you do hit the boss, it bounces you back and you are often thrown into one of the previously mentioned projectiles, which is very annoying as you will lose most, if not all, of your rings and can often die as a result. The moving planes are also annoying as it is possible for you to stand still, which means if you hit the edge of the screen, you will lose all momentum, which can make it difficult to dodge any incoming attacks. I just feel that the bosses are by far one of the weaker points in this game. Something else that Before the Sequel does is makes the player swap between Sonic and Tails after every zone. I really enjoyed this idea as in the story, Tails is always pursuing and trying to keep up with Sonic, and the change in gameplay is nice. The different characters have different types of levels, Tails having slow and relaxing, and Sonic's being action, speed and platforming. The visuals of the game are generally quite nice, and just like the enemies, the sprites used in levels mainly consist of recolored or edited sprites from previous Sonic games, and are used very effectively. However, the original sprites that have been created for this game, such as bosses, are not to the same quality and it is noticeable. With this said, the overall quality of the game is still very high. The backgrounds of the levels are well done and contain structures from older Sonic games such as mountain and fields, and are all used appropriately. The cutscenes that were created for this game are all animated nicely, however some of the animation is directly traced from the Sonic CD opening and even has white pixels around the edge. Despite this, the animation is still very nice and very smooth, and consists mainly of animated sprites. All work well to inform the player of what is happening in the game's story. And finally, the soundtrack is definitely my favourite part of the game. The songs in this game are made up of remixes of classic Sonic tunes, and what I'm assuming to be original tracks created for the game. All of the music in this game is to a very high standard and fits into levels very well, fitting both the tone and atmosphere of the levels. Now, this game has had a lot of care and effort put into it, and it definitely shows. This game does feel like an old Sonic game, and if that's what you want, with a new set of stages, I would say go and play it. But be warned, because this game is not perfect and does contain some frustrating boss battles. I will say that I personally believe the soundtrack's enough of a reason for me to recommend this game. However, if you do have no desire to play the game whatsoever, at least go to the website and download the soundtrack separately, because it alone is fantastic. I personally won't be going back to Sonic Before the Sequel. I found the problems I had with the game to be too much of an annoyance for me to want to keep going back and playing it, but at the same time I do believe it was worth playing. Again, I will go and listen to the soundtrack. I still say go download it, it is fantastic. You don't have to play the game to listen to the soundtrack. Links in the description as always, and thank you for watching.